let's get into the conversation right now with freedom lover and Sky News host Cory Bernardi, part of the Sky News team, and welcome to the Man Cave, beautiful Caroline Marcus.
So great to be here.
And a man who, of course, is our climate cop, the man to Matt Keen us all the way through the next few minutes, none other than the great Joe Hildebrand. Lovely to see him after hearing him on 2GB this afternoon as well.
Lovely to see you.
All right, I've had plenty, but I want to give you guys a crack at what I just mentioned at the start of the show. A report put together by activists that can't name a first, second or third best country when it comes to climate change, that ranks India with a net zero target of 2070, China with a net zero target of 2060, and Australia at the bottom of the barrel. And the media repeat the headline and then get the activists on as if they were independent experts to comment on their own report. Cory, I would like to call this a circle of bullshit.
Yeah, it is. It's and that's a polite way of talking about it, Paul.
Correct.
I mean, this is advocacy. This is advocacy research. You know, what's happening is the funds flow into these organisations so they can produce this propaganda. It gets regurgitated by the ABC and the Project and all these other garbage shows, which are full of muppets, by the way. And then, you know, that becomes the story du jour. The people who hate Australia and want us to be tearing us down and making us always look bad pick it up, run with it, and then the chattering classes get into it. It is a terrible thing because facts, reason, rationality, logic are all lost in this. It's like a theocratic debate. It's about a process of faith rather than a process of science, Paul.
Well, also, and we will see this in the federal election, the number of polls that will be paid for by union groups or climate activist groups that will run as news, they're about achieving a narrative. And again, Caroline, I put the challenge out to the people who reported on this today. Did they actually read the report, or did they read the report about the report and pick up the vibe of what the headline was about the report? Because if this was from the tobacco industry, you would view it with the cynicism that it deserves, as you should about any advocacy group.
Absolutely, as you should do with any report, let alone from an advocacy group or not. It is the role of journalists to question and scrutinise everything. But of course, journalists who are increasingly becoming activists on a whole range of issues, including climate, are too willing to swallow any headline that suits their narrative. So as soon as they see something as sexy to them as Australia ranking last in climate, it's too appealing. They can't look past it. They can't drill into it because, I mean, like everyone on the internet or social media, if something supports what you believe and your narrative, you're more willing to believe that. Doesn't matter how ridiculous it really appears. I mean, this, honestly, you use the term circle of bullshit. This is a circle jerk happening here. Let's be honest.
Only the classy pregnant lady could say that. The classy pregnant lady can say it, everyone, not us fellas.
The Man Cave is bringing it out of
Welcome. You let your inner bogan fly, all right? Now, Joe, again, right? Now, this is not about me trying to point at the example that proves the rule, that proves that climate change isn't. I'm not going to play that game, right? But what I'm saying is that this is an example of the media at its worst, and the media is how people are informed, and eventually the narratives that get built day by day by day to achieve political results. Today was an example of how willing they showed their hands. Much of the media was to push a narrative, not the fact.
Well, very reluctantly, I'm going to have to start by just correcting Caroline. In a circle jerk.
No.
In this situation, everyone still ends up unsatisfied. So just a small technical correction there.
Gee, you must have gone to boarding school, Joe.
Yeah, fair enough. See, we're a super late night show in New Zealand. We're kind of on the cusp on the East Coast, but enjoy your dinner right now in Western Australia. Anyway, sorry, Joe. Again.
The point being, I think this is one of the reasons why we felt we had to do this sort of Mission Zero series, because no matter what, there was this sort of constant, what I call a constant culture of complaint, where no matter what any government does, no matter what any person says, it's never good enough, it's never enough, it's always too little too late. And you get to a point where governments of both sides, quite frankly, or both sensible sides, Liberal and Labor, say, well, what's the point? If we're just going to get our asses kicked by the left and the hard right every time we do anything, then what's the point of making any progress at all? And you see this with, for example, we saw it with the Labor government, firstly, when the Greens 10 years ago voted against an emissions trading scheme because it wasn't perfect enough for them. Now we don't have one, and they're complaining that we don't have one. Well, we had an opportunity to have one, but they voted against it because it wasn't good enough. And of course, at the same time, you had people on the right attacking Labor, just as you had people on the right attacking the coalition for even embracing or acknowledging a net zero target. And you know, Scott Morrison had to wear a fair bit of political flack for that. But he did that because he accepts that this is what's happening, this is where the world is going, this is where business is going. And his reward for that from the people who have been calling for it for all these years is to just kick him in the nuts again. And that's why I think this debate has been so toxic, why it has been so absolutely crippling for Australian policy making.
Correct.
And that's why in the series we did, for example, there was none of this stuff. One of the sort of unspoken rules was there no carping, no criticising from the sidelines, no armchair quarterbacking. If you've got a plan, you've got a solution, you've got a good idea about how we can do this and be better off as an economy and a country, we'd love to hear it and we'll put it out there.
Yeah.
The whole constant, you know, whatever you do is never going to be enough.
Corey, just hang... Corey, just hang for a sec, because I'll give you a chance to respond. But I also just wanted to interject and show everyone what the Prime Minister had to say today, which was to start to show the philosophical underpinnings of why he's done what he's done and what his expectations are of how we get where he wants to go. This is different. This is a philosophical difference. Have a look.
Australians are always, aren't they, Alan, the most optimistic people in the room. Alan Finkel knows that too. They go, you Australians, you are hopelessly optimistic. And I go, yes, because we see the world differently and we look at things like climate change and go, we can deal with that. We're not going to be beaten by it. We're not going to get depressed about it. We're going to fix it, because that's what you do in Australia. You don't whinge and whine about it. You just get on with it.
All right, as you were, Corey.
Oh, I don't know where to start, but let me start with the Prime Minister there, okay? I support him saying there's a philosophical difference. We're going to go the technology route versus, you know, whatever Albo's cooking up this week with cash for clunkers or whatever he's got on the boil. But I've got to go back to what Joe said, right? This is more than a philosophical debate. You're not going to cure climate change, despite what the PM just said. And if you're committing to net zero 2050, you've actually got to cost it out and say, this is what it's going to cost us. This is the flesh on the bones here. And, you know, these empty sort of promises are all, they're glib, they get the headlines, but in the end, you know, there's going to be a real penalty. And I just make this point, that if business is going this way, which Joe said it was, I accept that. Why then do we have to throw billions of dollars or maybe trillions of dollars to assist them in it? It's crony capitalism at its worst, and they know they can get the sniff of big money. It's not about saving the planet, it's about lining their pockets with cash, and they cannot get it fast enough because governments are shoveling it out the door to make them look like they're doing something. And that's my problem with this. It's all BS. Yeah,
can I also just what's the term? Put a pin in it, which is when you just sort of mention something so that you can pull the tape out later and go, aha. Now, interestingly, one of the draft things they're about to pull together when it comes to Glasgow is a demand for all of the countries that have put their hand up or went to come back next year to show increased targets when it comes to 2030. Now, if you're sitting there going, oh, goodness me, that means that the government is now caught in some sort of tractor beam being pulled towards the Death Star. Think about, of course, the Labor Party, who have not stated what their position is when it comes to 2030 at all. So literally, if they won the election, they would have to go to that conference. And what would their promise be? We know what the government's position is. What's Labor? Let's put a pin in it, and we'll talk about that a little bit later.